But, speaking of all these, lovely things the Chinese Communist Party is doing, I think we should talk about finally we get the UN report on Xinjiang. It came out.
Literally, I saw on Twitter reporters waiting for it on Europe time, basically, and being like, it was something like 10 minutes to midnight when it was released. It was insane.
Yeah, literally, Michelle Bachelet, the UN, I forget her exact title.
High Commissioner for the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights is the office. So she is the High Commissioner on Human Rights.
Well, she must be really emphasizing the high part because she waited till like the last minute of her term to release this thing. People were wondering if she was even going to.
Yeah, I mean, she had promised to, but then she kept making kind of statements that seemed to be like, maybe we won't be able to get it out in time, etc.
And it's like, what hooks did China have in her? I mean, she has a long history of being associated with socialist and communist regimes. But, just why the resistance on the UN part to release a report about
China
genocide?
Is one of the biggest funders of the United Nations as a whole. I think second only to the U.S.
It's like a big gap, though.
There is a big gap, but the UN's not afraid of pissing off the U.S. because they know the U.S. will fund them no matter what.
Yeah, because if we have a president who says otherwise...
So China is also like a huge contributor to UN peacekeeping troops. Essentially, they're the number 2 country, even if monetarily or whatever, they don't give as much as the U.S.
Apparently to the extent that they submitted this report to China to review.
Yeah, I think that's not necessarily not standard, though.
But in the context of if a regime is being accused of genocide.
Well, I don't have a problem with them giving them a report. What I do have a problem with is them changing the report.
That's what I meant. It was given to them so they could review it and make changes and submit things.
Yeah, and the Bachelet's office was like, we will only change factual things. If they point out that we have a factual problem, then that's the only thing we're going to change. But then reporting came out of Politico that they had watered down certain sections, like the section on forced sterilization, which would have been, more sensitive.
So they watered it down to what? Suggested sterilization?
Well, the forced sterilization section was talking about how the birth rate had fallen off a cliff, really, for the Uyghur population, but it didn't go to the point where it didn't kind of imply or say outright that this was purposeful policy, because that would have essentially been one of the it would have indicated genocide, essentially.
Like a policy to reduce the population of a certain ethnic minority.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just, there's sterilization and the birth rates are falling, but there could be any number of reasons for that.
So
yeah,
true.
It would talk about the birth rate falling, but it also talked about things like people being given mysterious pills and medical exams and stuff like that, but didn't.
People might just sometimes want to go to a doctor more frequently and sometimes just take mysterious pills.
I mean, these were
like that.
Pills being given in the vocational training centers. So.
And they used that framing of them. They basically them vocational training skills. That they didn't call them. They didn't call them concentration.
No, they didn't call them that. And they had said that basically they said that the Chinese government calls these vocational education centers or something like that, and they used that, abbreviation through the rest of the thing. They did interview a lot of Uyghurs. They did document a lot of the torture that happened in these places, and they called it
a total wash.
Yeah, they called it torture. They called it human rights violations. They said it may constitute crimes against humanity.
Mm-hmm. But no genocide.
Yeah,
no mention of genocide.
And of course, we all hope that the Chinese government can, come in and help stop some of these things from happening.
Well, you say that as a joke, but that is basically what the report suggested as a solution, that the Chinese Communist Party, maybe stop and also investigate what's going on.
They said immediately stop, arresting these people, and also investigate the claims of torture and stuff like that are happening under this policy. That, it kind of acts as if the torture is happening under the policy, but not that the policy is directing the torture.
Yeah.
We have investigated ourselves and found that we are great, glorious, and correct.
Yeah, we are totally innocent. But the whole thing, what is maybe a little good here, though, is that the CCP's humongous pressure campaign on the Human Rights Office may have actually backfired on them a little bit, because there was some reporting that indicated that after the CCP started this, putting more and more pressure on the office, like people who were involved in the report were allowed to go back and interview more Uyghurs and like put some more stuff about back in the report. So yeah, it seems like they were feeling enough political pressure from not China to not completely cave. So is it as good as it could have been? No. Is it a complete wash? Like you said, no, it's not a complete wash. But so you can see how some of the CCP's pressure campaign could backfire as long as there is enough scrutiny from the rest of the world on this issue, you know?
And I mean, this is really a microcosm of a bigger issue of like just what is the United Nations? How does it actually function? And, you know, like we sort of have this, you know, romanticized, like it's Star Trek, you know, the idea that, oh, there's this international body that it doesn't look at any, you know, borders or countries. It just, you know, makes the peace
for the good of humanity.
Good of humanity. But, you know, what is actually the UN right now? Well, it's often very corrupt, very influenced by China. Is it possible that like an international organization like this will always be corrupted by the worst, most powerful countries? Or is it still possible that, like in the case of the report, there can be enough international pressure to not fall into that category? Or is what I'm trying to say is China ruined Star Trek for me.
Okay. Well, I do think that the Chinese Communist Party has had a policy where they have specifically tried to infiltrate and break down the UN, right? And always use it for their own best interests. Mm-hmm. So would the UN be better if there weren't countries that did that purposefully? Like, could it work if somebody wasn't purposely trying to undermine it?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, for example, the World Health Organization, part of the UN, when SARS was going on, they did a great job with that. They, you know, really put a lot of pressure on Beijing, did a lot of good investigations. But then
they managed to demand to be they demanded to be allowed to go into the Beijing hospital where they were hiding a lot of SARS cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then China realized, like, oh, this is a powerful position. Let's get our people in those positions of power, or people who are, you know, beholden to us. And then that corrupted the WHO just in time for COVID.
Yeah. I mean, the challenge with the challenge with the United Nations is that it's like, on one hand, you need a forum, right, where all the nations can come together and talk and hash out issues and whatever. And if it's an organization that is too ideologically controlled by a small number of countries, then the other countries like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, like they won't even join, right? They won't even come to the party. And then you've lost a valuable part of this forum, right? So you need to have an organization that is, like, in some sense, weak enough or malleable enough for these authoritarian regimes to at least come to the table, not fearing that, like, something's going to happen to them just for showing up, right?
What do you mean something's going to happen to them?
Well, like, okay, let's say that the United Nations was ideologically just controlled by, you know, the United States and Canada and Western Europe and these, you know, sort of free and democratic countries, including a few, you know, in the Eastern Hemisphere. Like, okay, then a country like China might just be like, well, we're not even going to bother showing up because every policy you have is part of your, you know, colonial hegemonic ideology, and we feel like we have no say.
Or more ideally, if a communist official shows up, they get arrested for crimes against humanity.
Right. And so, like, if that is what the United Nations becomes, then it doesn't actually work to unite all the nations, right?
I mean, the United Nations doesn't have all the nations in it.
Right. And so, like, even the original compromise, and it wasn't so clear, it should have been, but it wasn't so clear at the time how bad an idea it was to have the Soviet Union be part of the Security Council. So you've got like two parts. You've got the Security Council, which is 5 countries. 2 of them are, one's Russia and one's China.
Permanently. No, the Security Council is more than 5 countries, but there are
the 5 permanent members. Yeah. Right. So at the time in 1945, there was one authoritarian country, which was the Soviet Union. And China at the time was controlled by the nationalists, which was authoritarian, but it wasn't communist. And it wasn't very powerful. So like there was already like a pretty deep compromise. And there's also a deep compromise where for a lot of things, every country gets one vote. And the majority of countries are authoritarian countries, right? So there's, out of 200 countries, there's only, 20, 30 countries that are really free countries and, maybe 50 more that are like sort of, right? And then you have a lot of authoritarian countries. And so there's already like this tension, but also a balance of free countries and authoritarian countries that are vying for power in different ways in the United Nations, which is terrible, but also the only way to bring everyone to the table to be effective as an international body. It's just that you don't want that international body to have too much power, because if it has too much power, it'll be kind of the average of countries, which is on average authoritarian. Does what I say make any sense?
No, it makes sense. How does it make you feel about Star Trek?
Well, that it's communist propaganda.
Wow, it really did ruin Star Trek for you.
Yeah, Star Trek, what is it called? The Federation?
The Federation, yeah.
Right, that would be, in reality, that would be an authoritarian nightmare.
In our time, we don't have money. We all work for the betterment of individuals.
Why is that a 1930s newscaster voice suddenly?
That's me trying to be Picard.
No, that's how they talk in the future as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's very
Thank
fashionable.
God they didn't make him have a French accent. Could you imagine?
Yeah, Jean-Luc Picard, and it's Patrick Stewart,
Yeah.
the most British French person in space.
Yeah. Well, then every time they go to a planet and face difficulty, they just surrender.